We live about 30 miles outside the city, tucked deep into a stretch of woods on a 100-acre plot. The house sits half a mile off the main road, surrounded by trees, fields, and silence that feels heavier in the winter. It's peaceful mostly, the kind of quiet you don't notice until something disturbs it. When we bought the property, my wife insisted on having a security system. I didn't blame her. It was remote and we had kids. So I set it up. A gate at the front of the drive, a driveway sensor to alert us if anyone approached, cameras at the gate and around the house, indoor alarms, 2 puppies that were already growing fast. I'd grown up rural. I was used to the sounds of the wild. Screaming pigs, howling coyotes, snorting deer. You live out here, you learn to recognize what's normal. That's why I knew this wasn't. It was around 2 a.m. when I was jolted awake by the sharp, unmistakable crash of shattering glass. Half a second later, the house alarm started screaming. The main panel was in our bedroom, and I saw instantly that the glass break sensor in our son's room had gone off. For a second, I froze. Then instinct took over. I grabbed the shotgun from beside the bed, the one I usually kept loaded in case a rattlesnake wandered too close, and ran for his room, shouting to my wife to grab our youngest from the crib just in case. I could hear our older boy screaming through the hallway. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely turn the doorknob. Adrenaline hit me like a punch to the ribs. I kicked the door open with a shout, hoping to startle whoever might be inside. But there was no one. Just my son, clutching the rails of his crib in terror. The floor was littered with broken glass, and cold winter air poured in from the shattered window. The curtain flapped inward like it had been ripped loose. I shut the door behind me, grabbed him in my arms, and swept the room, the closet, the bathroom, behind the dresser. Nowhere to hide, really, but I checked anyway. No one. I called to my wife. We had this system between us, a way to check in without making too much noise. If one of us was face to face with an intruder, the other could call the police without tipping them off. She called back. She was fine, still alone, holding the baby. I passed her the shotgun and told her to stay put. Then I grabbed the flashlight and my rifle from the hall cabinet and did a sweep through the rest of the house, room by room, every door, every closet, nothing. No signs of entry, no muddy prints, nothing stolen. Just that broken window in our son's room. I locked the front door behind me and stepped outside. The cold hit hard. I walked the perimeter slowly, watching for prints in the frost or tracks in the soil, but there was nothing. When I got to the broken window, I looked around with the flashlight and caught a brief glint. Maybe an animal's eyes, maybe just a trick of light. I told myself it had to be a deer. Maybe it saw its reflection and panicked. It happens. I stood there longer than I needed to, trying to convince myself it made sense. The window had a bit of a blind spot. One angle the cameras didn't quite cover. I checked the footage anyway. No movement, no approach, no impact. It was like the window just shattered on its own. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. My wife and I stayed up with both kids, listening for sounds that never came. It took me weeks to let our son sleep in that room again. I keep telling myself it was a deer, that it saw itself, panicked, hit the window and fled. But in the back of my mind, I can't stop thinking, what if it wasn't? What if someone broke that glass, heard the alarm, and ran before they got caught? The next day, I installed more cameras, one facing each side of the house, covering every window. I put up motion lights on all 4 corners. Now the whole property lights up like a prison yard if anything comes near. And most nights our dog, no longer a puppy, sleeps curled up right next to our son's bed. I still haven't figured out what happened that night, but I know one thing for sure. Whatever it was quiet, too quiet, and it was gone before I ever had a chance to see it. I've lived in the countryside most of my adult life. There's a quiet comfort in it. The isolation, the stillness, the hum of wind through tall grass. People who visit think it's peaceful, and for the most part, they're right. But there's a side to that stillness no one talks about. A side that unsettles you not because of what you hear, but because of what you don't. That night started like any other. The sky had gone dark early, clouds thick and low, and the air smelled like rain that never came. I'd gone to bed a little after midnight. My bedroom was on the ground floor, facing the back of the house. Just beyond my window was an open stretch of grass, our back garden, which eventually bled into an overgrown field and the forest beyond it. It had always been like that, untamed, quiet, almost untouched. I remember drifting off to the sound of crickets and wind against the house. The dogs were asleep downstairs, curled up on their beds in the corner of the kitchen. 2 black Labradors, calm and lazy as ever. I didn't expect the silence to be broken. Sometime around 3 a.m., I was pulled from sleep by a noise I'd never heard before. A violent, guttural growling that made the walls tremble. It was so out of place that I froze for a moment, unsure if I was dreaming. But the growling didn't stop. It got louder, and it was coming from the dogs. They weren't barking to be let out. They weren't whining or pacing or begging for food. They were warning something. Loud, sharp bursts of sound laced with something deeper. Fear. I got out of bed and moved carefully toward the kitchen. As I turned the corner, I saw them both standing stiff and still, tails rigid, fur raised along their backs. Their eyes were locked on the back door, the one that led to the garden. They didn't even flinch when I entered the room. Their focus didn't shift. Something was outside. A chill ran up my arms as I grabbed the flashlight from the drawer. I wasn't thinking clearly. Part of me assumed it was a fox, maybe a badger. We'd had the occasional animal wandering near the bins, but the dogs never reacted like this. I took a fireplace poker from the stand near the wood stove, just in case, and slowly approached the back door. The garden lights weren't on. It was pitch black beyond the glass. And then something happened I'll never forget. As I reached for the handle, both dogs flinched violently and bolted from the room. Not just a casual retreat, they ran, claws slipping on the tile, scrambling to get away. I stood there alone, hands still on the door. I hesitated. For a few seconds, everything was still. The only sound was my breathing. Then I opened it. The cold hit me instantly, along with a heavy silence I didn't understand. No wind, no insects, just stillness. I stepped out onto the stone patio, flashlight shaking slightly in my grip. I swept the beam across the yard. Nothing, just grass and darkness. I leaned forward, trying to see deeper into the garden, and that's when I caught it, just for a fraction of a second. Eyes, 2 glowing orbs, far back near the hedgerow. The light caught them just long enough for the reflection to bounce back. They were high, too high for a fox or badger, too wide apart, too still. Then they blinked and vanished. I didn't hear anything run. I didn't hear a branch snap or leaves rustle. Whatever it was, it turned and moved away like mist. Just gone. I slammed the door shut, locked it, and turned off the flashlight. My heart was hammering. I didn't want to admit I was shaken, but I was. The dogs were hiding in the hallway, refusing to come back into the kitchen. Their bodies were low to the ground, tails tucked, eyes wide. They had never done that before. Ever. I tried to settle down, but something about the night felt wrong, like a weight was pressing on the house. I eventually brought the dogs into my bedroom and shut the door. We all slept light, if you could call it sleep at all. The next day I told myself it must have been a deer, maybe even a big stray dog. The countryside can play tricks on you at night. I tried to let it go, but 3 days later something else happened. In the local paper, a small fold-out thing that only came once a week, There was a short article buried in the back. A farm about a mile from us had suffered a strange loss. Their sheep, several of them, had been found torn apart. Not mauled, not attacked in the way wild animals usually do. The bodies had been ripped open, limbs scattered, organs removed. The report called it unexplained. No tracks, no signs of struggle, nothing missing, just destruction. It hit me like a punch. I knew that mile of land. I'd walked it many times. It ran along the same tree line that bordered our garden. That night came back in a wave. The growling, the eyes, the silence, and the dogs running in fear. I wanted to call someone, tell them what I'd seen, or thought I'd seen, but I didn't. What could I say? I saw glowing eyes in the bushes. My dogs freaked out and I felt scared. It didn't feel enough, and maybe it wasn't, but I haven't forgotten. Because even now, years later, the dogs still won't go near that back garden after dark. They'll walk with me out there during the day, tails wagging, sniffing around like normal. But the moment the sun drops below the trees, they stop. They sit by the door and stare at the shadows. And sometimes they growl low and uncertain, as if they're waiting for something to return. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe it was an animal, just passing through. Something wild, displaced, looking for food. But deep down, I don't believe that, because there's nothing in England that moves like that, that looks like that, that makes even the bravest dogs run for cover. Whatever it was, it didn't want to be seen. And whatever it was, it's still out there, somewhere beyond the hedge, waiting for the next quiet night. My dad used to rent a house deep in the countryside. It wasn't just remote, it felt forgotten. The closest town was a 45-minute drive down a cracked, narrow road, and the nearest neighbor was another 15 minutes past that. The house stood at the edge of an old property lined with fields, overgrown brush, and a few weather-beaten structures that hadn't seen use in decades. The land also had a series of pheasant enclosures, tall chain-link pens that stretched out along the tree line. They weren't my dad's responsibility. They belonged to the owner of the property, an old friend of his from high school. Still, he kept an eye on them out of courtesy. One morning while sipping his coffee, my dad noticed something strange. The farthest enclosure, the one closest to the woods, was dead quiet. Usually you could hear the birds squawking and flapping from the porch, especially when the sun came up. But not that day. He walked over to check, and what he found was beyond disturbing. Every single pheasant, nearly 50 of them, was lying motionless on the ground, all dead. But it wasn't a coyote or fox. There were no signs of struggle, no blood trails, and none of the birds had been eaten. It looked deliberate, controlled, surgical. He called the property owner immediately. The guy came out that afternoon and brought footage from the motion-triggered cameras he'd installed around the pens. What they saw made both of them go cold. Sometime around 3 a.m., a man neither of them recognized appeared on the edge of the property. Dressed in dark clothing, he wore a headlamp that cast a harsh circle of light as he moved. He didn't go near the house. He didn't hesitate. He went straight to the farthest pen, crawled under the fence, and began catching and stabbing the pheasants one by one. There was no rush in his movements. He wasn't trying to feed himself or escape. He was calm, focused. He took his time, methodically working through the birds. Then just before sunrise, he stood up, wiped the knife on his jeans, and walked off the property the same way he came in. They handed the footage over to the police, but nothing ever came of it. No one recognized the man. No leads, no license plates, no reports of anything similar. My dad didn't take it lightly. That night, he made us stay with our mom in town. He returned to the house alone, but not unarmed. For weeks afterward, he slept with a loaded gun on the nightstand and a flashlight in his hand. He kept the bedroom door locked, and the dog, usually calm and lazy, never left his side. The property owner upgraded the fencing, installed alarms, and brought in 2 trained guard dogs, friendly during the day, but different when the sun went down. Nothing ever happened again. No more intruders. No more dead animals. But here's the part that stays with me. The man never even glanced at the house. He didn't care who lived there. He wasn't looking to steal or to scare anyone. He came in the dead of night, killed 50 birds slowly, precisely, and left. Like it was just something he needed to do. I've lived in rural areas my entire life. Remote properties, scattered homes, wide open land. All of it brings a kind of quiet that city people find unsettling. I never did. I was used to the sounds of wildlife, the yips of coyotes, the sudden huff of a deer, the unnatural screech of a feral bobcat. It's background noise to me. But I've also come to learn that sometimes it's not what you hear that stays with you. It's what doesn't make sense. It started one night when I was sitting outside, watching the goats graze near the edge of the field. The sun had dropped behind the trees, and the last streaks of blue were draining from the sky. That's when I heard coyotes, somewhere northeast of the property, a couple miles out. Their howls were scattered and high-pitched, normal for this time of year. But then something else joined them, a growl, deep, low, and constant, that swallowed up their howling like it was nothing. It didn't rise or fall. It just was, like a warning siren too low for the average ear. I'd hunted hogs, wildcats, all manner of things across North America. I'd heard animals in distress, anger, confusion, but nothing ever sounded like that. And then, just as quickly as it had started, it went silent. Dead silent. That silence is harder to explain to people than the sound itself. It was heavy, like the air had turned to glass and nothing could move through it. Even the bugs had stopped. I went inside not long after that. Nothing came of it. But I never forgot that sound. My parents live a few towns over, in the kind of old farmhouse that creaks and settles, and sometimes seems to breathe on its own. But what's always been odd about their place is how often voices are heard. Through walls. Everyone hears it eventually. You'll be in a room alone, reading or making tea, and suddenly you catch the sound of people talking through the walls. Clear voices, not muffled, not distant. The moment you step out into the hall, the voices vanish. It's like they were only real inside that one space. It happens often enough that we don't talk about it much anymore. One time when I was house sitting for them, I was home alone. Everyone else was out of town. My parents, siblings, everyone. I left the bathroom door open while showering, just to keep the air from fogging up the place. I heard the front door open, then came laughter. My parents' voices, unmistakable. I heard them putting things down, joking with each other. I jumped out, wrapped a towel around myself, and rushed to greet them. But when I stepped into the kitchen, no one was there. No vehicle in the drive, no bags, nothing moved, nothing touched. The older dog was calm, probably deaf at that point, but the smaller dogs were in full-blown panic, barking at the door, pacing, whining like something was still in the house. I called my parents, half expecting them to say they'd forgotten something and come back briefly, but they were still 2 towns away, just finishing dinner. I tried to shrug it off. You have to sometimes living out here, but then there are nights when the house seems to breathe under your feet. I remembered another moment, much earlier, when I was about 4 or 5. My mom used to sleep in the living room with me and my sisters during summer nights, just to keep us close. We'd watch King of the Hill on TV, then fall asleep on cushions on the floor. One night, we all heard the small ferret door at the base of the basement stairs slam shut. It was loud. Loud enough for all of us to look at each other at once. Mom bolted up and went to wake Dad. He checked the basement. Nothing was disturbed. There was no other way out down there. The stairs were carpeted, old and soft, and as we later learned by testing, it took a good bit of force to make that door slam like it had. No one was down there, but something had made that sound. Years later, my parents told me something else that I never forgot. When I was around 4 and my sister was 2, they were sleeping one night when a loud, deliberate knock came from the wall beside their bed. 3 knocks. Solid, intentional. They looked at each other. The kind of look you only give when you both heard the exact same thing. My dad grabbed a baseball bat and checked the house. But we, the kids, never woke up. The dogs, usually alert to any disturbance, never stirred. They even brought in police and a tracking dog the next day. Nothing. No prints, no signs of forced entry, no evidence at all. The walls never made that sound again. But it's hard to explain away something that clear, that loud, that deliberate. And then there's the time when I was around 14. My bedroom didn't have a desk, so my computer was set up in the kitchen. It was late, probably past midnight. I was gaming with headphones on when I noticed a faint tapping. I ignored it at first. I thought it was part of the game. But then it happened again, and again. I paused everything, pulled off my headphones, and realized the tapping was real, and coming from the door that led to the garage. The door was across the room. I stared at it for a second, then grabbed the nearest thing I could find, a kitchen knife, and started walking toward it. The tapping stopped. I opened the door and turned on the garage light. Nothing. I shut the door again and stood there for a moment. Then it started again. Tap, tap, tap. I woke up my mom, told her what was going on. She groaned and told me to go to bed. But the tapping came back, loud and undeniable. She sat up, listened, and for the first time, I saw her face go still. We both heard it. She checked the garage herself. Nothing. It didn't happen again that night, but I never stayed up late in the kitchen after that. And finally, the one thing I used to think was just a joke, something my sister made up to scare me. She always said that between midnight and 4 a.m., she could hear a woman crying down in the basement utility room. It was connected to the guest bedroom and bathroom. I laughed it off, said it was the plumbing or wind through the vent. Then one summer, she came home for the 4th of July with her little boy. She passed out early in her old room, and I agreed to keep an ear out for her son while she slept. Sometime after midnight, I heard crying. I thought it was the baby. It made sense, so I went downstairs. But when I opened the door to the utility room, it wasn't a child. It was a woman, sobbing, full, deep, broken crying. I froze. The room was dark. The sound was coming from behind the bathroom wall. It wasn't like anything I'd heard before. It had weight to it, like grief you could touch. I closed the door and ran back upstairs. Sat in the kitchen for almost an hour, just waiting for the sound to fade. Eventually, the baby cried. I heard that clearly, and the difference between the two sounds was impossible to miss. One was a baby, the other wasn't. This one isn't mine. It was told to me years ago by someone I used to know, a woman I worked with for a while, and even now it sticks with me. The way she told it, the way her voice dropped near the end. She wasn't just trying to be dramatic. She'd lived with it, grown up with it. She was 12 when it happened. Back in the late 90s, her family moved around a lot. Her dad worked with heavy industrial equipment, welding, mechanical systems, short-term contracts, so they rarely stayed in one place more than a couple years. Most of the time they lived in rentals, cheap houses in forgotten corners of Michigan. This one was out in the northern part of the state. A 2-story farmhouse with an attic that stretched the length of the house. It was deep in the middle of nowhere. Nearest neighbor was 2 miles out, next one even further. Town was close to an hour away. But the rent was cheap, the land was big, and her mom liked the idea of growing her own vegetables. Her dad didn't mind the commute to whatever job site he was at. She and her older brother, he was 13 then, each had their own room. His room had a closet, and inside that closet was a small wooden door that led to the attic. The kind of odd design you only see in houses built before anyone cared about symmetry or insulation. At first, both of them thought it was awesome, like a secret clubhouse waiting to happen. But their parents shut that down quickly. Said the attic was too cluttered, too unstable. Old boxes, trunks, furniture, and worse, if anything fell, no one would hear them up there until it was too late. They were told not to go up there at all. But there was one more thing. A second door, tucked at the far end of the attic, directly above her room. It was locked. Nobody had the key. Her dad, maybe sensing their curiosity, shoved a mattress and a bunch of furniture in front of it. Said the stuff in the attic belonged to the last tenants. The landlord didn't care what happened to it, never came to get it, never cleaned it out. Her parents didn't want the kids poking around and finding anything dangerous or inappropriate. She told me she never asked what that might mean, but the door, the locked one, stayed in her mind. Then the sound started. She told me it happened maybe once or twice a week, late at night, always faint at first, like shifting weight, footsteps, then the scrape of a box being moved, and sometimes a slow, steady creaking, rhythmic, like something rocking. She figured it was her brother. It made sense. If he was sneaking through their parents' bedroom at night, getting up there to poke around, maybe he was trying to clear a path to that locked room. She never said anything, didn't want to rat him out. Until one morning in early summer, a Saturday, she slept in that day, woke up to sunlight through her window and looked out to see her parents working in the garden. Her brother was supposed to be helping them. She went downstairs, grabbed cereal, came back up to her room, and that's when she heard it. Footsteps, on the attic floor, right above her. But this time it wasn't night. It wasn't soft. It was clear, confident. She crossed the hall into her brother's room. His closet was open, the attic door too. She climbed the steps just enough to peek inside, saw the mattress shoved aside, boxes pushed back, and that door, the one that had always been locked, was now cracked open. Then she saw him, her brother. He looked at her, smiled, and said her name. "You've got to see this," he said. He waved her in, then turned and disappeared inside the room. She told me she had never felt that kind of fear in her life, not even later, as an adult. Said the only thing that came close was once hearing a cougar growl nearby when she was walking in the woods at night. She ran, down the stairs, through the kitchen, and straight outside. Her brother was in the garden, had been there all morning. She tried to explain, but all she could say was, "I heard someone in the attic." Her dad didn't waste time, told her and her brother to wait by the driveway. If he and their mom didn't come back out in 10 minutes, they were supposed to ride to the neighbors. Fast. He grabbed a pistol from the truck, told their mom to stay near the phone, and went inside. He cleared the house, then the attic, came back angry, said the furniture had been moved. The door had somehow come open. Figured the boy had snuck up there, pried the thing open, and was lying about it. The kid swore he hadn't touched anything. Said the attic creeped him out. Too many spiders. She told me he still hates spiders. But what they found in that room was just one thing. An old wooden rocking chair. Bare wood, dust-covered, close to falling apart. No window, no light, nothing else. No footprints either. Just the ones her father had made. But the mattress and boxes had clearly been moved. Her brother got grounded for the rest of the summer, but she never believed it was him. After that, she refused to sleep in her own room, started staying on the couch downstairs whenever she could, because the sounds didn't stop. At night, she'd still hear them. The slow scrape of movement, then the creaking, the rocking, over and over, right above her old bed. One time she was still awake when it started, and that's when she realized something else. There were no footsteps leading to the sound, no pacing, no crossing, just the chair, already rocking. She never told her brother any of this, not about the day she saw him in the attic, or the fact that he was outside at the same time. Not about the sounds, not about the chair. But years later, I asked him about it. He remembered the punishment, was still bitter about it, said he missed out on riding four-wheelers with the neighbor kids because he got blamed for something he never did. Said he figured it was her playing a prank and then staying quiet when the parents flipped out. I asked him if anything strange ever happened to him in that house. He said no, but he did say something I didn't expect. He said he used to have strange dreams there. All the time. Couldn't remember the details, just that they were weird, and they never left him feeling rested. She told me she still has 2 recurring nightmares. In one, she's standing in the attic entrance, just like that day, and her brother pokes his head around the door and smiles at her. Same smile, same wave. But in the dream, she knows it's not him, and as he steps closer, that fake smile stretching, she can't move. Right before he reaches her, she wakes up. The other dream is worse. He's in the room, dusty, pale, face streaked with tears, and he's begging her to help him, pleading. She says that in the dream, it really is him. She can feel it. And then something pulls him back into the room. The door slams. She never moves, and that's when she wakes up, with guilt and fear every time.